Colin, Dixon, collectively, we represent the plaintiff in this case, Victoria Denning, mother of Kay Denning. We've prepared a packet that we haven't actually prepared for your honor's convenience, with a notice of appearance, pleadings, stipulations, copies of the exhibits, and jury instructions.
Okay.
Additionally, we have a notice of appearance for the jury. May I approach?
Yes.
My favorite packet.
Your Honor, we have a few housekeeping items that I would like to address whenever Your Honor is ready.
Okay. Let's get introductions over here first, and then we'll get into housekeeping.
Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I'm Clair.
And I'm Colin. Collectively, we represent the defendant in this case, Zeta Lambda Nu Fraternity.
And additionally, we have notices of appearance for yourself as well as the members of the jury.
Okay. All right, done. Housekeeping.
Yes, Your Honor. I would like to ask as to where to place exhibits once they've properly been entered into evidence.
Put them on the clerk's desk over here,
Thank
the podium.
you. I would like to confirm that all objections will be heard constructively outside the presence of the jury.
You will need to ask to go outside the jury.
And I would like to confirm that all time will stop for all objections.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. I would also like to confirm that all witnesses have been constructively sworn.
Any objection to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, all witnesses are sworn in.
Additionally, Your Honor, the exhibits have been pre-marked for identification purposes. We just ask that as those exhibits are properly entered into evidence, that they retain their pre-identification markings.
Do y'all plan to use those same markings?
Yes, Your Honor, we do.
Okay.
Lastly, Your Honor, we would like to bring to the court's attention that Your Honor has previously ruled that this case has been bifurcated, therefore damages should not be addressed today.
So liability only,
Yes, Your Honor.
is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor. The plaintiff is ready to
okay.
proceed.
Any housekeeping or motions from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, we have one substantive motion and additionally one more housekeeping matter. The court has previously ruled that any consumption by Ms. Denning while under the drinking age in Lone Star is not negligence per se, as well as any admission to any parties of Ms. Denning's was not negligence per se. So we will not be arguing that today.
Any admissions of any parties?
Any admission of Ms. Denning to any parties is not negligence per se while under the drinking age in Lone Star.
You mean a statement she made to a party, or the fact
No,
that she was
actual
let
admission
into
to
a
a
party? Okay. Is not okay, the fact that she was let into a party is not negligence per se. Got it. Okay. Any objection to that?
No objection. Your
Okay.
Honor.
Then that will be instructed to the jury.
And with that, we have a substantive motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Today, our first motion involves Exhibit 10, which can be found in the case packet on page 58. Exhibit 10 is a campus police report from a prior incident involving the Zeta Lambda Nu Fraternity. That incident took place back in 1988, so over 20 years ago at this point. Today, we anticipate the plaintiff to elicit testimony regarding this report and the investigation that was completed back in 1988 into this specific incident. Today, we would ask that the court rule that this exhibit and any testimony about this prior incident be ruled inadmissible. Today, we do not anticipate the plaintiff to be able to lay enough foundation to show the substantial similarity between this prior incident and the incident at hand here today. Also, the second prong of the 404 analysis requires that the defendant in this case, for this incident to be admissible, the defendant to have notice of this incident, to have actual knowledge. We do not anticipate the plaintiff to be able to lay any foundation that the defendant in this case, any members of the fraternity who were present on the night of this accident, had actual notice of this prior incident. Therefore, under Rule 404, this prior incident, this prior act should be ruled inadmissible.
Do you plan to go into that prior act he's referring to here today?
No, Your Honor, we do not. However, we would like to challenge any potential exclusion of the report simply on this analysis and cross-examine on it. This police report is admissible under 803-883, meaning that police reports can be used in civil cases regardless of notice to the defendant. That would only be in a criminal case. So in the case that this comes up today, they can definitely cross-examine on it, but we would not like to exclude it at this time.
Well, do you plan to elicit testimony about this prior incident he's moving to exclude?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Well, then, to the extent that you are not going to do that, I will grant that motion. However, should testimony be elicited about it, then obviously we'll need to revisit and discuss whether that report can be admitted or whether questions can be asked about it. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yes, Your
Anything else?
Honor. No, with that, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
All right. Plaintiff, are you doing openings at all? Okay. You may, cool. You may proceed with your opening statement.
May I please the court?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I didn't think she would really do it. These are the things that Andrew Dornberg had to say after Kay Denning was allowed to jump headfirst into a shallow pool off of an 8-foot-tall lifeguard chair, and after she lost her life because of it. I'm so sorry. Courtney Perez runs over to help Kay, but there's nothing that can be done. Kay's skull has already been fractured in 3 separate places. Paramedics come, but all that can be done is taking her to the hospital, where she stays unresponsive and on life support for 6 days. But the life support has to be turned off, and goodbyes have to be said. But all that Andrew Dornberg can say is, I'm so sorry. Today you will learn that Andrew Dornberg and Zeta Landanu planned for 2 things the night of that accident. They planned for having a party, and they planned for Kay Denning to attend. But Andrew Dornberg and Zeta Landanu had 2 simple responsibilities that night that came along with having a party. They had to manage it, and they had to monitor it. And that's all. But they didn't care about that. They didn't think things through. They didn't ponder the consequences of having a fraternity party, or having alcohol around, or inviting people who were under the age to come, because they didn't plan for safety. They planned to party. And on the night of May 24, 2014, Zeta Landanu planned for a combination of alcohol, shallow pools, and old lifeguard chairs. And they planned the party of the year. But what they actually planned was a complete nightmare. A nightmare that means that the Denning family can't have their daughter here today. And you'll learn that she isn't here because of the actions of that fraternity that night. Actions that planned a disaster. I'm Madeline Dukes, and I, along with my co-counsel, Christy Commons, represent the plaintiff, Victoria Denning, Kay's mother. And throughout the course of today's trial, we want you to ask yourself 2 things. Who failed to manage, and who failed to monitor a situation that led to Kay Denning's death that tragic night? Now, this all began on May 24th, 2014, when the fraternity Zeta Landanu planned a beach party. A party that they were going to celebrate the end of the school year, and they were hoping that it would be a giant blowout. They poured sand on the front lawn and brought in tarps and hose and garden materials to create a pool. They also brought in a lifeguard chair and put it right next to the pool. But the pool they built was only 2 feet deep. And you'll hear that the lifeguard chair they brought in, well, it was old and rickety and not exactly stable. But what they didn't do is they didn't put up warning signs about how shallow this pool was or how dangerous it is to dive into a shallow pool. They didn't warn anyone about how old and rickety the lifeguard chair was. They didn't even put up a fence to keep people out of the pool or to keep people out of the party. All they planned for was having fun. And that afternoon, Andrew Dornberg, who was then the treasurer of the fraternity and now the president, he climbed on top of that lifeguard chair. And he began inviting people to come to the party that night. And when he was up there inviting people to come to the party, he spotted a pretty girl in a pink shirt walking by. And he yelled to her through a megaphone. He said, "Hold on, let me get down." And as he hurried down the lifeguard chair, he slipped and fell. But luckily, Andrew Dornberg, he was able to get down on that lifeguard chair safely. And when he did run over to Kay, he got her number and began texting her over and over again, trying to convince her to come to the party. But then Kay did try to go to the party, and someone else turned her away. And she told them, "But Andrew's invited me here." She was confused as to why she wasn't let in, but she left. And she went to another party and began to drink. And today you'll hear from Kay's friend, Chris Bloom. Chris will tell you that even after Kay wasn't let into that party, that Andrew continued to text her, telling her to come back, inviting her to the party at Zeta Lambda Nu that night. And you'll hear from Chris that he was worried about Kay because Kay was drunk. And he was so worried about Kay that he began texting Andrew, letting him know that Kay didn't need to be there, warning him that Kay shouldn't be out, that she'd already had too much. And Chris will tell you that Kay disappeared after talking to Andrew, and that he went to Zeta Lambda Nu's party to find her. And he did. And I'll tell you that Andrew Dornberg shouted out to Kay, "Don't go diving without me." And that Kay climbed up that lifeguard chair and jumped into that shallow pool. And you'll hear a lot today about how much Kay drank, and we don't dispute that. Kay was drinking a lot that night. Today's case is not about how much Kay drank, though. It is about the party that was planned to be a drinking party. A party that Kay was constantly and consistently invited to. And a party that Kay got into. And a party where Kay Denning fractured her skull in 3 places. Where she was found unresponsive and not moving. Where 6 days later she died after never having regained consciousness. I'm so sorry. And so are we. And that's why we're here today. Members of the jury, today you must answer 2 very important questions. Were the defendant's actions that night negligent? And if so, what role did that negligence play in Kay Denning's death? And to answer that question, you'll need to know what negligence means. And at the end of today's trial, the judge will tell you that in Lone Star, negligence is the failure to use ordinary care. The failure to act as a reasonable person would or should. And the judge will tell you that we have to prove this to you, as the plaintiff, by a preponderance of the evidence. Now, all that means is that we have to show you that it's more likely than not that the defendant's actions caused the tragic accident of Kay Denning. And I want you to think about this burden with the scales of justice. This side is the plaintiff, and this side is the defense. And today, at the beginning of trial, where we are right now, the scales are completely even. But as we're here today, the evidence will start stacking up on each side. And at the end of today's trial, both in the physical evidence and in the testimony, the scales will have tipped. And they're going to add weight to the scale, and whichever side is weighed down by more evidence, even by just a fraction, must prevail. By the end of today, we're convinced that you will see the weight of the evidence is with us. By the end of today, you'll see that it's more likely than not that the actions of Zeta Lambda Nu resulted in the death of Kay Denning. And that's it. That's all we have to prove. But it is your job to decide. And in coming to that decision, I want you to remember the questions I asked you earlier. Who failed to manage and who failed to monitor the situation that led to Kay Denning's tragic death? That's it. Just those 2 things. Who failed to manage and failed to monitor the situation that night. First, you'll hear that the fraternity didn't manage the party that night. You'll hear that they didn't plan to have a fence around that shallow pool, that they didn't plan to have warning signs about how shallow the pool was, or about not climbing on a lifeguard chair, or even after Andrew Dornberg himself slipped on it, trying to get down that chair, that nothing was done to deter anyone getting up on that. That in all of their plans for a party in a risky environment with alcohol, that Zeta Lambda Nu was simply not concerned with the safety of Kay Denning or anyone else at that party. Because they weren't planning for safety. They were just planning for fun. Second, you'll hear that the fraternity didn't monitor that party, that they didn't take any actions to keep things under control. They didn't strictly monitor the party to make sure that underage people stayed out. They never even planned to have enough manpower to monitor the party. They just had one guy checking IDs at the door. At the door of the house of the party, where the party was in the yard. Zeta Lambda knew that Kay was there in the backyard of that house after she had been turned away. But you'll hear that no one escorted her out. No one ever tried to make her leave. Andrew Dornberg invited Kay over and over and over again to come to that party. And by the end of the night, it was clear that the fraternity failed to monitor the situation and enforce their own rules. Because Zeta Lambda Nu didn't think that there would be consequences for breaking rules. They didn't think that there would be consequences for having a shallow pool with an own lifeguard chair and no warning signs. They didn't think anything could go wrong with that party or the beach that they created. They didn't think anything of inviting Kay. And they didn't think of anything of having Kay climb up that lifeguard chair. I'm so sorry. Zeta Lambda Nu thought that night would be one to remember. And they were right. They planned a party, but they never planned to take responsibility for the consequences of their actions. But there were consequences. Show Zeta Lambda Nu that there are consequences for their actions, and that when they planned to have a rickety old lifeguard chair, a shallow pool, alcohol, that what they were actually planning for was disaster. Find Zeta Lambda Nu liable at the end of today's trial. Thank you.
Defense?
May it please the court?
Yes.
At 1 a.m. on May 25th of 2014, a drunk college student arrives at a fraternity house. She'd already been turned away earlier that night because she wasn't 21, but that didn't stop her. She's told that the party's over, that she needs to leave, but even that doesn't stop her. She walks past a shallow pool and starts to climb a lifeguard chair. What are you doing? You're going to fall. People are shouting at her, but nothing could stop her. Today you'll hear about what happened to a college student when she decided to break the rules, when she decided not to follow the restrictions, and when she decided to take risk after risk, all because she wanted to be the life of the party. You'll hear about what happened when nothing could get in the way of a good time, when Kay Denning was simply unstoppable, and unfortunately it cost her her life. I'm Clair Hollingsworth, and I, along with my co-counsel, Colin Spangler, represent the defendant, Zeta Lambda Nu. Now, anytime someone loses their life, it's nothing short of a tragedy. And when that person is a young person like Miss Denning, it's even more difficult. And we want to find someone to blame, someone to hold responsible. And while it's so easy to point that finger and to cast blame, it's so much harder to find the right person to blame, to find the person that's truly responsible. So today you must listen to the testimony and evaluate the evidence to determine who the facts tell you is truly responsible for the death of Miss Denning. Throughout the course of today's trial, I want you to remember the 3 R's: rules, restrictions, and risk. All of this began on May 24th of 2014, when Zeta Lambda Nu decided to throw a party, and Miss Denning heard about it, and she was determined to go. But there was a problem. Miss Denning wasn't 21. She wasn't legally allowed to drink in the state of Lone Star. And while that mattered a great deal to Zeta Lambda Nu, it didn't matter to Miss Denning, and it didn't stop her. When she arrived at that party that night, she was asked for her ID, and all she said was that she had left her ID at home. At no point that night did she tell the person checking IDs or the person who'd invited her to the party, Andrew Dornberg, that she wasn't 21. But because she couldn't prove that she was 21, she was turned away. She was asked to leave. But that didn't stop her. She went to another party where she began to drink and drink. She had mixed drinks and shots, even drugs. And she began to cross that line. The line between what is responsible, between what's reasonable. After a while, she left her friend at that party, and she went back to Zeta Lambda Nu. She snuck into the backyard where she was told, "The party's over. You need to leave." But that didn't stop her. And she walked around to the front yard of that house, where again she was told, "The party's over. You need to leave." And she began to climb that lifeguard chair, and people shouted at her, "What are you doing? You're going to fall." But nothing could stop Miss Denning that night, and she crossed the line. Now, if you remember those 3 R's we talked about earlier, rules, restrictions, and risk. That night, Miss Denning broke the rules by drinking underage. That night, she chose not to follow the restrictions that Zeta Lambda Nu had placed on the party. Restrictions to keep people safe, to keep people who weren't old enough to drink out of the party and at home. And that night, Miss Denning took risk after risk by drinking to excess and by not listening to any of the warnings. Now, today, the plaintiff is going to try to prove to you that Zeta Lambda Nu was negligent. And because they were negligent, Miss Denning died. Now, in the state of Lone Star, negligence is the failure to use ordinary care, the failure to act as a reasonable person would or should. Today, the plaintiff has to prove to you by preponderance of the evidence that Zeta Lambda Nu's actions and their actions alone were the cause of Miss Denning's death. Now, it's not enough for them to prove that Zeta Lambda Nu was negligent, because they must also prove that Miss Denning was not negligent. Today, they'll tell you there were 3 ways in which Zeta Lambda Nu was negligent. That they allowed Miss Denning into the party knowing she was underage. That they allowed Miss Denning into the party knowing she was drunk. And that they told Miss Denning to jump off of that lifeguard chair. But members of the jury, they will be unable to prove this to you today. They will not be able to prove to you that Kay Denning was admitted into that party when they knew she was under 21. Because Kay Denning wasn't admitted to that party. She was turned away at the door. She was told to leave. Plaintiff will also be unable to prove that Zeta Lambda Nu allowed Miss Denning into the party knowing she was drunk. Because Miss Denning wasn't allowed into that party, drunk or sober. They turned her away and they asked her to leave. And finally, the plaintiff will be unable to prove that Zeta Lambda Nu told Miss Denning to jump off that chair. Because you'll hear they did exactly the opposite. The only thing Miss Denning heard when she was on top of that lifeguard chair was, "What are you doing? You're going to fall." Zeta Lambda Nu could not protect Miss Denning from the greatest danger that night. Herself. The plaintiff will be unable to prove that Zeta Lambda Nu acted unreasonably because they did everything that they could. They sent out invitations addressed only to those of legal drinking age. They had someone checking IDs at the door. They had a 6-foot sign over their door saying no one under 21 allowed. They turned Miss Denning away. They asked her to leave and they warned her she would fall. That night, Miss Denning was underage, over-intoxicated, and out of control. That night, she crossed the line. And unfortunately, it cost her her life. At the end of today's trial, find Zeta Lambda Nu not liable.
Plaintiff, you may call your first witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff calls Chris Bloom. May it please the court.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Chris Bloom,
How old are you, Chris?
21.
Are you in school?
Yes.
Where at?
I'm a junior at Tall Tree College.
Why are you here today?
My best friend, Kay Denning, died.
How did you know Miss Denning?
We grew up together.
Did you go to college with Miss Denning?
No.
Where did Miss Denning go to college?
The University of Lone Star.
How often did you get to see her?
Every once in a while.
Where were you on May 24th, 2014?
I've gone to visit Kay
Were you at the University of Lone
at the
Star?
university, yes.
And what did you and Miss Denning do when you first got into town?
We went out to eat and walked around trying to find something to do.
About what time was it when you were walking around?
Around like 6:30, I think.
What did you see when you were walking around?
We walked past the Zeta Lambda New house and saw that they were getting ready for a party.
And how did you know that they were getting ready for a party?
They had tiki bars and pools and everything set out in front of their house.
No, Chris, let's break that down a little bit. Would you recognize a map of the layout of this party if I showed it to you?
Probably.
Your Honor, I'm now showing opposing counsel what's previously been marked as Exhibit 2. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Now showing the witness what has previously been marked as Exhibit 2. Chris, can you tell the members of the jury what that is?
It looks like a layout of the Zeta Lambda New house and front yard and backyard.
You recognize it?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the house that night?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Without objection, Exhibit 2 will be entered into evidence.
Thank you. Now, Chris, when you walked by this house, what exactly was in the front yard?
There was a pool made of sandbags, sandy beach, a little tiki bar, and a lifeguard chair in the water. There was a few guys floating on rafts, and there was some guy who I now know is Andrew Dornberg sitting on top of the lifeguard chair with a megaphone and a beer. He had his shirt off and was yelling at everyone with the megaphone.
Okay, now let's break that down a little bit. So, first off, where were you and Miss Denning standing when you first saw this scene in the front yard?
On the sidewalk,
Was there anything in the front yard blocking your access to step into the yard in this scene?
no.
And if people were on the sidewalk, how would they access the front yard with this beach scene?
They could just walk right into it.
Who was there to stop people from walking right in?
No one.
Chris, you also said that you saw a tiki bar in the front yard. What is a tiki bar?
Just a bar made of grass and bamboo, and it had alcohol drinks being served at it.
Would you recognize a picture of this tiki bar if I showed it to you?
Yeah, probably.
Now showing opposing counsel what's previously been marked as Exhibit 4. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Now showing the witness what has previously been marked as Exhibit 4. Chris, do you recognize that?
Yeah,
What is it?
it's the tiki bar.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the tiki bar?
Mm-hmm.
Your Honor, at this time, plaintiff offers Exhibit 4 in evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Without objection, Exhibit 4 will be entered into evidence.
Chris, where was this tiki bar?
It was in the front yard to the left side of the pool and sand area.
Now, on that map that I handed you earlier, can you point out to the jury where that tiki bar was?
Right here.
Thank you. And what was being served from that tiki bar?
Alcoholic drinks.
Now, you also said that there was a lifeguard chair in the front yard, right?
Yes,
Would you recognize a picture of that chair if I showed it to you?
probably.
Now showing opposing counsel, it's previously marked as Exhibit 5. Permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Now handing the witness what has previously been marked as Exhibit 5. Chris, do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is it?
It's the lifeguard chair that was in the front yard.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of that chair?
Yes.
this time, plaintiff offers Exhibit 5 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections.
Without objection, Exhibit 5 will be entered into evidence.
Now, when you and Miss Denning were walking by the Zeta Lambda new house that night, where was that chair?
It was in the front yard in the water.
How much of it? I'm sorry.
In the pool area.
How much of it was in the water?
About 2 to 3 feet of it.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Response?
May I be heard outside the presence of the jury?
Sure.
Your Honor, Mr. Bloom will testify in a few minutes that he walked up to the pool, walked up to the side of it, and he was able to see how much water was actually in the pool.
Why is that
Mayor,
speculation?
We have no problem with him telling what he imagined would be the depth of the pool, but to state as a fact that it was between 2 and 3 feet is speculation.
Limit it to what his perception of the depth of the water is. I'll sustain that. You can re-ask the question.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Chris, about how much water did you think was in the pool?
About 2 to 3 feet.
And how far up on that lifeguard chair did you see the water come to?
It was about here.
Thank you. Now, you also said that when you and Miss Denning walked by the Zeta Lambda new house, you saw someone sitting in that lifeguard chair.
Yes.
Who was that?
A guy that I now know is Andrew Dornberg.
What was Mr. Dornberg doing when he was sitting in that chair?
He had a beer in his hand and he had a megaphone. He was yelling at people through the megaphone.
Did Mr. Dornberg say anything to you or Miss Denning?
Yes. He was talking to us through the megaphone and asked us to come over.
What happened after he said those things?
Kay and I walked over to the side of the pool, and Andrew walked across to talk to us. Did Mr. Dornberg have to climb down from that lifeguard chair before he walked over to you? Yes.
What problems, if any, did he have when he came down from that lifeguard chair?
He slipped and spilled his beer on the way down.
Now, what did you and Miss Denning talk about with Mr. Dornberg?
Just chit chat stuff. Andrew was hitting on Kay. And he also asked us, or invited us to come to the party.
How is he gonna, did he ask for yours or Kay's phone number?
He asked for Kay's number, and she put it in his phone. And then she handed me the phone, and I did the same and gave it back to Andrew.
What happened next? Kay and I went to a sorority party, the Xi-Phi. Oh wait, no, sorry. We went back to her sorority, and there was a group of sorority girls going to the party at Zeta Lambda Nu, so we hooked up with them. And around what time was it when the group of you guys went back to the Zeta Lambda Nu house?
I'm not sure.
Was it after dark?
I can't remember.
That's okay, Chris. So what happened after you got back to the Zeta Lambda Nu house?
What page that's on.
Motion to approach the witness.
You
Your
may.
Honor.
We went to the party and tried to get in.
Were you able to get into the party?
No, there was a sign saying you must be 21 to enter.
How old were you and Miss Denning at that time?
We were both 20 at the time.
Now, where was the sign that you just said that you saw? Where was it hanging?
It was hanging over the front door.
And was there anyone stopping you from going in the front door?
There was a guy, someone that I now know as Courtney Perez. He was checking IDs.
And why did you have to be 21 to get into the front door?
It's the legal drinking age.
Were they serving alcohol at
Yes.
this party? Now, on the map that we were talking about earlier, can you point out for the jury where the front door to the house was? Thank you. Now, at this time, when you were trying to get in to the party at Zeta Lambda Nu, what was blocking access to the beach scene in the front yard from anyone standing on the sidewalk?
Nothing.
What signs did they have in the front yard saying that you had to be 21 to enter?
They didn't have any.
Who was standing in the front yard close to the sidewalk checking IDs?
No one.
Now, what happened after you and Miss Denning couldn't get into the party?
We walked around and eventually ended up at another party.
Was there alcohol at this other party?
Yeah.
Now, since you were both under the legal drinking age, why were you trying to find another party to go to that was serving alcohol?
No, we're college kids. That's what college kids do, is party.
So where exactly did you and Miss Denning end up going?
We ended up at an apartment house a few blocks away.
Do you remember around what time it was when you got there?
Probably 10 or so.
Now, did either you or Miss Denning actually drink alcohol at this apartment?
Yes.
About how many drinks did you have?
I'm not a big drinker, so I had 2 or 3.
And what about Miss Denning? How many drinks did she have?
She was drinking kind of a lot that night. I know she had maybe 3 or 4 vodka cranberries, possibly more. She might have done some shots, maybe a hit or 2, maybe had a brownie.
Now, are you absolutely sure that Miss Denning had all of this that night?
No, I was talking to other people. I wasn't with her the whole time.
Now, was Miss Denning on her cell phone at all while you and her were at this apartment party?
Yes, I saw her texting multiple times.
Do you know who she was texting?
I can only assume that it was Andrew Dornberg.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
What's your response to that?
It was, he stated that he assumed it happened. He's not saying it as a fact.
Isn't that speculation?
I'll rephrase.
Okay.
Who was Miss Denning texting that night?
Objection, Your Honor.
Well, that is either he knows or he doesn't, so overruled.
I can't say for sure. I assumed it was Andrew Dornberg.
Just take the word assume out.
Yeah.
It was Andrew Dornberg.
Now, at any point when you were at the apartment, were you concerned about how intoxicated Miss Denning was?
Yes.
And did you ever say anything to her about that?
Yes, I did.
What did you tell her?
I told her that she needed to go home. She was pretty drunk.
Did she agree to go home?
to the Zeta Lambda New Party.
Now, after you realized that Ms. Denning had left, did you at any point ever text Mr. Dornberg?
Yes.
Would you recognize those text messages if I showed them to you?
Yes.
Now, showing opposing counsel was previously marked as Exhibit 8. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Now, handing the witness what has previously been marked as Exhibit 8. Chris, do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is it?
It's some text messages I sent to Andrew, and he sent it to me.
Has that document been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, plaintiff offers Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, hearsay, especially relating to those text messages sent by Chris Bloom himself.
What do you say to that?
Permission to be heard outside the presence
Yes.
of the jury. Your Honor, specifically regarding the text sent by Chris Bloom himself, we're not offering them for the truth of the matter. We're simply offering them to show the effect on the listener.
Okay. That they were sent, who were they sent to?
That they were sent to Andrew Dornberg.
Okay. And then showing what his responses to those questions were, I guess.
Yes, if any.
What about that?
Your Honor, they have laid the foundation that Mr. Dornberg actually received these text messages or read them, and so if he was not a listener, there can be no effect.
How about that?
Your Honor, at the same time that Mr. Bloom had been sending these messages to Andrew Dornberg had also been texting Kay. His phone was working. He was able to see text messages and he was able to respond to them.
Did he respond to any of the messages that Chris sent?
He responded 6 days later.
So he did respond.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we would contend that he did not respond if it took 6 days, and therefore there can be no effect on the listener laid for that night, as he was not the listener, as he can't prove that he received those text messages.
I'm gonna overrule that objection. If they're not, as long as they're not for the truth, I think it's okay.
So, just for clarification purposes, Your Honor, the entire document is in evidence.
The entire document is in, the statements made by this witness are not offered for the truth, therefore they cannot be argued as such.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Chris, why did you send these text messages to Mr. Dornberg?
I was concerned about my friend Kay.
And did you think that she might try to go back over to Zeta Lambda Nu?
Yes.
Now, if you could, please read for us the first message that you sent to Mr. Dornberg that was around 1 a.m.
The first one around 1 a.m.
Yes.
Hey, this is Chris again. I'm worried about Kay. Is she meeting you?
What time did you send this message?
That was at 1:12 a.m.
Did you get a response to this message?
No.
What did you do after you sent that message?
I sent another.
Before that?
Before I sent the other message?
Did you ever try to look for Kay?
Yes.
What did you do?
When I couldn't find her, I texted him again and told him that she was in really bad shape.
Did you stay at the apartment this whole time?
No, I started over there right away.
Now, you said that you texted Mr. Dornberg again. What did that second message say?
It said, seriously, I think she's way too drunk to be out right now. Let me know if she's there.
What time did you send this message?
At 1:34 a.m.
Did you get a response?
No.
Now, were you able to find your way back to the Zeta Lambda new house?
Yes.
And who specifically did you see when you got there?
I saw Kay climbing on the lifeguard chair.
Did you see anyone else?
I saw Courtney and Andrew.
What was Andrew doing?
He was going out to help.
Before that.
No, before that. He was yelling at her.
Did he have anything in his hands when he was yelling at her?
I can't remember.
Permission to approach the witness room.
Yes. Do we have an iPhone cable?
How much do you want me?
What?
How much do you want me?
It's up for debate.
Little bit, lot bit?
Somewhere in the middle.
I ask him that every time he needs an iPhone charger.
Somewhere in the middle.
The first time I asked him, it depends on whether or not I have one.
That's about right.
That's about right.
Alright, so what was Andrew doing?
He was running out of the house with a pitcher in his hand and yelling.
What happened next?
I saw Kate climbing on the lifeguard chair. I started running when I saw her, but everything seemed kind of in slow motion. She was slipping a lot, and when she got to the top, she stood up and wobbled around and then fell head first into the water. By the time I got to the pool, Courtney was already in the water with her, and Andrew was going out to help. I just stood there and I couldn't even move. Andrew yelled out something like, "She's okay, she's okay." And the next thing I remember were the sirens.
What happened to Miss Denning?
Eventually,
Yes.
she died.
Did you ever get a text in response from Andrew?
Yes, 6 days later.
And what did that message say?
Says, "I'm so
Objection,
sorry."
Your Honor, 403.
It's already in evidence. Overruled.
Chris, what did that message from Andrew Dornberg say?
It said, "I'm so sorry. All my fault."
And what day was this that he sent it?
May 31st.
Is there anything in particular about that day?
That was the day that Kay had died.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any cross-exam?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Bloom, you were 20 in 2014, right?
Yes.
And Kay Denning, she was also 20.
Yes.
Now, you're aware that the legal drinking age in the state of Lone Star is 21.
Yes.
So on May 24th of 2014, neither you or Kay Denning were legally allowed to drink.
Yes.
Now, you were invited to that party at Zeta Lambda Nu by Andrew Dornberg, correct?
Correct.
But when you were invited, you didn't tell him that you weren't 21.
No.
And Miss Denning didn't tell him that she wasn't 21.
No.
All right, now, you saw an invitation to this party, didn't you?
Yes.
And you saw this at Kay's house.
Yes.
You'd recognize a copy of that invitation?
Probably.
Showing opposing counsel exhibit 1. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Mr. Bloom, this is that invitation you saw, correct?
Correct.
And you'd agree with me that that's a true and accurate depiction of that invitation?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense offers exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, exhibit 1 is entered into evidence.
Now, Mr. Bloom, if you could please read aloud to the jury who this invitation is addressed to.
All sisters in good standing, old enough to drink.
Now, this invitation wasn't an open invitation.
No.
It didn't invite 18-year-olds.
No.
And it didn't invite 19-year-olds.
No.
And it certainly didn't invite 20-year-olds.
No.
So even though you saw this invitation, you still tried to go to the party that night.
Yes.
All right, well, let's talk about what happened when you got to that party. When you got there, you saw a large sign over the door, right?
Yes.
And you'd recognize that sign if you saw it today.
Yes.
Showing opposing counsel exhibit 3. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Mr. Bloom, this is the sign you saw that night, isn't it?
Yes.
And this is a true and accurate depiction of that sign?
Yes.
All right, this time the defense offers Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, Exhibit 3 will be entered into evidence.
Now, Mr. Bloom, can you please read aloud what that sign said?
Must be 21 to enter.
And the sign we have today in court, that's a pretty small version of the sign, right?
Yes.
The one that you saw that day was actually 6 feet long,
Correct.
and you could see it from the street.
Correct.
So you read that sign, right?
Yes.
Realized you weren't 21,
Yes.
and continued to walk to the front door of that party.
Yes.
And then you were asked for your ID,
Yes.
but you didn't give them your ID.
No.
And Kay Denning didn't give them her ID.
No.
She just said that she'd left it at home.
That's right.
Now, you were turned away because you couldn't prove that you were 21.
Right.
So you were told to leave.
Yes.
Now, I know you've got that map right in front of you. If you wouldn't mind holding it up for the jury. So if you'd show the jury about where that sign was over the door.
Right here.
And that's also where Courtney Perez was standing checking IDs, correct?
Yes.
Now, Courtney Perez could see all of the front yard from the front door, right?
Yes.
And he turned you away at that front door.
Yes.
So you knew that you weren't allowed anywhere within that house.
Correct.
And you weren't allowed anywhere within the backyard.
Correct.
You weren't allowed in the front yard of that party either, as you were turned away.
Right.
So you weren't allowed at that tiki bar.
No.
And you weren't allowed in that pool.
No.
And you weren't allowed on that chair.
No.
And neither was Miss Denning.
No.
Okay, so thank you for holding that up to the jury. So Mr. Bloom, after you were turned away from the party, you decided to go to another party.
Yes.
And there you and Kay decided to have a few drinks.
Yes.
In fact, Miss Denning decided to have more than a few drinks.
Yes.
That night, you saw her have 3 or 4 vodka drinks.
Yes.
And she may have had some shots. She may have smoked some marijuana.
Right.
And she may have even had a pot brownie.
Right.
So after all of that, you'd agree with me that Miss Denning was not sober.
Yes.
And at that point, Miss Denning left you, didn't she?
Yes.
And you went looking for her and you couldn't find her.
Correct.
So you went to look for her at Zeta Lambda Nu,
Yes.
where you'd both already been turned away.
Yes.
And when you saw her, she was in that front yard.
Yes.
The front yard you just told the court you weren't allowed to be in.
Correct.
And you saw her climbing on that chair,
Yes.
where she wasn't allowed to be.
Right.
And at no point did you hear anyone tell her to jump off that chair.
No.
And you didn't see anyone encouraging her to jump off of that chair.
No.
And you didn't see anyone give her alcohol that night.
No.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor. Permission to publish the exhibits to the jury.
Any redirect of this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Assuming that the jury is finished looking at the exhibits.
Yep.
Now, Chris, let's go back to when you and Miss Denning first walked past Zeta Lambda Nu after dinner. What did Mr. Dornberg say to either of you?
The first time, he yelled out to us.
And what did he say?
Specifically, he said, "Hey, you in the pink shirt, you want to come to my party tonight?"
Was that an invitation to the party at Zeta Lambda Nu later that night?
Yes.
No. You talked with the opposing counsel about the sign over the front door on cross-examination. Okay, where was that sign hanging?
Over the front door,
And where was Courtney Perez standing?
in front of the front door.
Did you ever see Courtney Perez anywhere else?
No.
just, I mean, your perception of it.
Rather large.
Now, when you and Miss Denning approached Courtney Perez, did Courtney Perez ever say to you that you weren't allowed in the backyard?
Specifically the backyard?
Yes.
No.
Did he ever say you weren't allowed in the front yard?
No.
No further questions here.
All right, witness may step down.
Permission to put exhibits on the card.
Does the plaintiff have any other witnesses it wishes to call?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we call Alex Bell.
Gotta remember to exclude that one text.
Yeah. Colin was whispering shit in my ear. I'm like,
Have a whole like big thing when you argue.
I decided to wait. That's how we'll beat Harvard. I'm just kidding. Of course it's gonna be
I hope we get Harvard in the first round now, just because.
Well, we decided to quit if we beat Harvard.
Harvard?
Claire's obsessed with Harvard for some reason.
I don't think that's
I
an
get it,
explanation.
though. I get it.
May it please the court.
Yes.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Alex Bell.
And Mr. Bell, what do you do for a living?
I'm a police officer with the University of Lone Star Police Department.
How are you involved in today's case?
I investigated the death of Kay Denny.
Before we discuss that investigation, let's talk a little more about your background. How long have you been in law enforcement?
Since I graduated from Lone Star,
About how many years is that?
20, 25 years.
What type of training do you have in the field of law enforcement?
Well, on top of my degree in criminal justice, I also have a certificate from the Lone Star Ranger School. I've learned a great deal about criminal law, accident investigation, forensics, interrogation techniques, and everything kind of like that.
What type of crimes do you typically investigate?
Well, we see a little bit of everything. We see DUIs, fights, petty crime, fender benders, and the occasional booze-fueled parties, fights on campus, that kind of thing.
Now, you told us that you investigated the death of Kay Denning. When did you first become involved in that case?
It was we got the dispatch call at 1:55 in the morning on the 25th, and I went to the Zeta Lambda house immediately.
Is that where you were specifically dispatched to?
Yes.
You've told us that you're an officer with the University of Lone Star, correct?
Yes.
Where is the Zeta Lambda New House in relation to the University of Lone Star campus?
It's right on campus.
When you got to the Zeta Lambda New House, were you able to locate Kay Denning?
Yes.
How did Miss Denning appear when you found her?
She was barely breathing. She wasn't responsive. She wasn't moving.
Are you aware of Miss Denning's condition today?
Yes.
Can you tell us what that is?
She has passed away.
During your investigation, did you learn the cause of Miss Denning's death?
I did,
How did you learn that?
through my investigation through the autopsy report.
If I showed you a copy of that, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Your Honor, showing opposing counsel what's been marked as Exhibit 11. Permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Officer Bell, what is that?
This is the autopsy report of Kate Denning.
And is that a true and accurate copy?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff would move Exhibit 11 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Without objection, Exhibit 11 will be entered into evidence.
Officer Bell, using that report, can you tell us what the cause of Miss Denning's death was?
Trauma to the skull and the brain.
During your investigation, were you able to learn how this occurred?
I was.
How was that?
The trauma occurred from Miss Kate, or Miss Denning, climbing the lifeguard stand and falling on her head into a pool of water.
When you found Miss Denning, where was she?
She was on a sand beach next to the pool, or pond, whatever they want to call it.
Officer Bell, you spoke a lot about the Zeta Lambda new house. If I showed you a map of that house, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to retrieve Exhibit 2?
Yes.
Officer Bell, can you tell us where, in relation to the Zeta Lambda new house, the beach Miss Denning was found on is?
It's in the front part of the house, right in front of the house.
And that map, it indicates a pool. You saw that pool that night, right?
Yes.
Can you describe it to us?
Yeah, hole in the ground, a few feet of water, right off the sidewalk in front of the house.
In relation to the pool, where was the lifeguard stand?
It was on the back end of the pool, right in front of the house, like right on the beach.
Now, also on that map is a bar. Did you see one that night?
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about the alcohol you might have seen at that bar or at the Zeta Lambda new house?
Yeah, I saw, saw a lot of empty red and blue cups. I noticed an empty bottle of rum, empty bottle of vodka bottles. So there was a lot of alcohol.
And which area of the Zeta Lambda new yard was all of this in?
Again, this was in the front part of the front of the house.
How could a person access that area?
You can just walk up to it from the sidewalk.
Based on your experience, would that have been a hard thing to do?
No.
Officer Bell, what type of security was there monitoring the front yard that night?
There wasn't any.
What type of security was there monitoring the backyard that night?
Again, there wasn't any.
Objection, speculation.
What was your response to that?
Your Honor, Officer Bell not only was at the Zeta Lambda new house that night, but conducted an investigation, spoke with people at the party. Based on his perception, he's more than able to have the knowledge to testify as to what type of security might have been there that night.
Matter may be heard. The witness
Or,
testified.
excuse me, outside the presence of the jury.
The witness testified that he arrived at the scene only after Kay Denning had been injured. He wasn't there during the party. He cannot confidently testify as to whether there was security in the front yard, the backyard, or even at the front door while that party was going on, because he wasn't there to be able to see if anyone was actually running security at that point. Therefore, anything he testifies to would either be speculation or information he gained through hearsay. Both would be inadmissible.
Your Honor, Officer Bell conducted an investigation. He's been doing this for 20 to 30 years. He's more than able to do so at a competent level. If he was able to gain information that night, he spoke with the defendant and their agents. He's more than able to speak to what he knows, and it absolutely is something that the defense is able to cross-examine on and poke holes and show that he wasn't there until 1:55. But that doesn't mean that we can't ask him what he knows about the situation.
Well, let's figure out how he knows it. I mean, if he didn't arrive until after the party broken up and everyone was gone, then he obviously didn't observe security in the backyard, or whether there was or not. So I'll sustain that objection. If you have a question that can set out how he would know various bits of information, we can go down that road.
Okay. May I have a moment to confer with him?
Sure.
Officer Bell, during the course of your investigation, were you able to speak with anyone from Zeta Lambda Nu fraternity?
Yes.
Who were you able to speak with?
I was able to speak with Andrew Dornberg and Courtney Perez. Right? Chris Perez? Courtney Perez.
And Officer Bell, based on your observation and your talks with these two individuals, was there any security located in the front yard of that house that night?
Objection, Your Honor, this question elicits hearsay.
What about that?
We're not offering it for the truth of the matter. We're offering it to see whether or not he learned or was told of anything going on here. The fact that he was not is just as, well, hold on. I need to get my thoughts together. Anything Officer Bell may or may not have been told by either Andrew Dornberg or Courtney Perez is offered as an exception to hearsay because it's a statement by a party opponent. Anything he was able to observe himself, he has personal knowledge of, and the question is directly framed to show those specific things. We're not saying that he can't cross-examine and say, you weren't there at 8 o'clock that night. We're specifically asking what he was told by the party opponent and what he saw himself.
So if he's basing this off of things he learned from Dornberg or Perez, isn't that a statement by a party opponent?
Your Honor, no foundation has been laid that either of these individuals are a party opponent in today's case. If counsel was prepared to lay that foundation at this point, this testimony will be admissible, but at this point we've heard improper foundation to establish that these two individuals are party opponents.
What about that?
Your Honor, we are more than prepared to discuss the agency relationship between both Dornberg, Perez, and Zeta Lambda Nu Fraternity to establish them as agents and therefore as individuals as party opponents.
I'm going to overrule that objection at this time.
Officer Bell, based on your investigation of the scene and on your conversations with Courtney Perez and Andrew Dornberg, are you aware of any security monitoring the front yard of the Zeta Lambda Nu house that night?
I am not. There wasn't any.
And with the same qualifications, are you aware of any security monitoring the backyard that night?
No, I'm not.
What about the pool?
No.
What about the bar?
No.
Are you aware of any security at the house that night?
After talking to Courtney Perez, he told me that he had been at the door most of the night to the actual fraternity house. He also told me that it was, apparently he was the party organizer for that night, and he told me that he had been at the door most of the night checking IDs and letting people in.
Were you able to learn anything else about Courtney Perez that night?
I had learned that he had been drinking as well.
Was this important?
Well, it's not a good thing for the guy monitoring security to be drinking. So,
Why not?
I mean, if you're drinking and taking part in a party, how are you supposed to monitor who all comes in, who's drinking, who's actually underage, or anything that's going on, for a matter of fact?
Would drinking have What specifically were your concerns about drinking that night? Or about Courtney Perez's drinking that night?
He could have been distracted, he could have impaired his judgment as to where, letting people in or really anything.
Now, Officer Bell, you've told us about having spoken with some of the people in attendance at the party that night, specifically Andrew Dornberg. Are you aware of his relationship with the fraternity?
Yes, he is the fraternity treasurer, I believe.
How did Mr. Dornberg appear when you were speaking to him?
He was drunk. His eyes were glazed over, he was slurring his words, he had some trouble balancing, all pointed to him being drunk.
were you able to tell anything about the appearance of Mr. Dornberg's emotions that night?
Yeah, he appeared to be in kind of a state of shock. He was a little hysterical at times. So,
What did Mr. Dornberg tell you about his role in the party?
his role in the party? I do not recall about his role in the party.
Permission to approach, Your Honor?
You may.
One second, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel has been marked as Exhibit 9.
Go ahead.
Officer Bell, using that, can you tell us what Mr. Dornberg told you about his role in the party that night?
Yeah, he told me he was the treasurer of the house, of the fraternity house, and he was also in charge of the party that began early in the evening on May 24th.
During your investigation, what were you able to determine about the relationship between Mr. Dornberg and Ms. Denning?
Well, it appeared clear they knew each other.
What did Mr. Dornberg tell you about how Ms. Denning was injured?
He told me that somehow they had come to an agreement that she was going to climb onto the lifeguard chair and do a cannonball off the top of the lifeguard chair into the pool. But he doesn't really remember who it was that came up with the idea.
Officer Bell, you told us that you typically investigate alcohol-related incidents. What did Mr. Dornberg tell you about Kay's consumption of alcohol? Did he tell you that Kay had been drinking?
Yes.
Were you able to determine how much alcohol Kay consumed that night?
Yes, I was.
How?
The autopsy report had her BAC level.
Officer Bell, in your experience, the BAT tests, are they run by any specific department?
Again, I do not recall at this time.
Officer Bell, are blood alcohol content level tests run by the Lone Star Department of Public Safety?
Yes, they are.
Are you familiar with those reports?
Yes, I am.
If I showed you one, would you recognize it?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, showing opposing counsel has been marked as Exhibit 12. Permission to approach?
You may.
Officer Bell, what is that?
This is the lab test of Kate Denning from the Lone Star Department of Public Safety.
And is that a true and accurate copy?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff moves Exhibit 12 into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit 12?
No, Your Honor, this document has been stipulated as admissible prior to trial.
Without objection, then Exhibit 12 will be entered into evidence.
Officer Bell, what does that report tell us about Kay's blood alcohol content?
Says her BAC was 0.19.
And in Lone Star, what is the legal level of intoxication?
0.08. Of course, if we're considering you're of age.
And how old was Kay?
20.
And what is the legal drinking age in Lone Star?
21.
Based on your training and experience with alcohol and those related incidents, would there be any visible signs of a person has a BAC of 0.19?
Yes.
What would those physical
Objection,
effects?
speculation.
Sustained.
No further questions.
All right.
Motion to approach and retrieve.
Yes.
You want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
You can do it. If you can do it with this.
If I can do it with this.
Don't mess it up.
Thanks.
All right. Now, Officer Bell, you've been a police officer for quite a long time, haven't you?
Yes, since college.
And you've actually spent your entire career working here at the University of Lone Star.
Yes.
And you're a campus police officer.
Yes.
Now, during your time, you've had the opportunity to investigate many crimes.
Yes.
And because you're on a college campus, many of those involve college students.
Yes.
And you said many of them also involve alcohol.
Right.
Kids having too much to drink and getting themselves into trouble.
Yeah.
So you have to break up fights and investigate parties.
Yeah. For sure.
Now, you would agree with me that during those investigations, you have to be thorough.
Yes, absolutely.
You have to interview all the witnesses,
Yes.
collect all the evidence,
Yes.
and then accurately compile all of that into a police report.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about what you did in this case.
Okay.
Now, in this case, you went to the Zeta Lambanu house at around 2 o'clock in the morning on May 25th.
Right.
Now, when you got there, that's when you found Kay dead.
Yes.
And after you secured help for it, you began investigating what had just happened.
Right. Yeah. Started interviewing people there.
Now, you found out that Kay was actually under the influence of alcohol at the time of her death.
Yes.
And you learned that Kay had been drinking at parties before she went to that fraternity house.
Yes.
And that those parties were in no way affiliated with this fraternity.
Yeah, I don't believe they had anything to do with this fraternity.
Now, you never went and spoke with the homeowners of those parties that Kay had gone to before.
Well, I didn't find a young girl's body at their house. I found it at the fraternity house.
But you did learn that they had provided alcohol to an underage person.
I had one of the witnesses did say that she or he had been with Kay at a party somewhere else. Yes.
And that they had been drinking at that party.
Yes.
That they had been provided with alcohol at that party.
Sure.
But you never followed up on that lead, did you?
I didn't really consider it a lead in the cause of her death, but yes.
Well, even outside of her death investigation, you never went and spoke with those homeowners about providing alcohol to underage folks.
No, I didn't.
You never asked them why they had provided Kay with alcohol on that night, did you?
No, I did not.
Now, in this case, when you were at the Zeta Lambanu house, you learned that Kay had been drinking out of a cup right before her death.
Yes.
But you never recovered that cup at the scene, did you?
No, there were tons of cops everywhere.
But this specific cup that Kay was drinking out of, you got a pretty good description of it, didn't you?
Yes.
It had words written on it.
Yes, it did.
But you never found that cup near the pool or anywhere else in the Zeta Lambanu house.
No, I didn't.
You can't tell us where that cup came from.
No.
You can't tell us if she got it from that party
No.
or if she brought it with her when she came from those other parties.
No, I can't.
You can't tell us if there was alcohol in that cup, can you?
No, I cannot.
Or if there had been alcohol in the cup, where it came from.
Again, no.
Now, during your investigation, you found no evidence that any member of Zeta Lambanu had actually poured alcohol into the cup Kay had.
No, I did not.
You found no evidence that any member of Zeta Lambanu gave her alcohol on that night.
No, I did not.
But what you did find is a marijuana pipe in her pocket.
Yes, I did.
That marijuana pipe actually had Kay Denning's DNA, her saliva on it.
Yes.
And you learned during your investigation that she had been using marijuana at a party before she went to that fraternity house.
Yes.
But you never went to that party to find out where Kay got this marijuana from.
No, I did not.
You never went and spoke with the people at that party to find out who gave Kay these drugs.
No, I didn't.
You didn't go to that party to try to find out if that marijuana was laced with something, did you?
No, I didn't.
So you never followed up on this lead as to this marijuana that you found on Kay Denning, did you?
No.
Now, in this case, you would agree with me that Kay Denning was actually turned away from the Zeta Lambanu house.
Yes, when she went earlier in the evening, she was told to leave before coming back.
She was turned away by the security guard at Zeta Lambanu by the name of Courtney Perez.
By the guy, Courtney Perez, who had been drinking at the party, who was at the front door, yes, he told her to go.
Well, he was providing security that night. He was checking IDs.
Yeah, at that moment in the night he was.
Now, you said that he was drinking, but when you interviewed him, he didn't appear to be under the influence of alcohol at all. I believe it's on the top page of the police report, where you're talking about Courtney Perez's interview. Right up at the top.
Repeat the question, please.
When you interviewed Courtney Perez, he didn't look like he was under the influence of alcohol.
No, he did not.
And you never breathalyzed him to actually see if there was any alcohol in his blood.
Nope.
Now, you can't tell us here today if Courtney Perez was under the influence of alcohol when he was checking those IDs.
I did not check his blood alcohol level.
You didn't follow up on that lead.
No.
Now, in this case, you learned that Kay Denning's blood alcohol level was a .19. Is that right?
Yes, from the lab test.
And that she also had marijuana in her system that night.
Yes.
She had 37 grams of marijuana in her body.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
What's your response to that?
Your Honor, a piece of evidence has been entered in court today, Exhibit 11. That autopsy report details the results of a test, a THC test that relates to the amount of marijuana that was in her blood. This has already come into evidence without objection.
As to speculation, I'll overrule it. If you have anything else, I would consider it.
Yes, Your Honor. We still believe that this piece of information is not relevant. We have no way for this witness to testify to the details of what that means, whether or not that's a high level, a low level, and even if it is on either side of the spectrum, it's still not relevant, and it still serves to prejudice the plaintiff more than it is probative to the
Who entered the evidence that has this information on it?
The plaintiff did, Your Honor.
I'll overrule that objection.
You would agree with me, Kay Denning had 37 nanograms of THC in her body at the time of her death.
Yeah, that's what the autopsy report says.
THC, we all know, means marijuana.
Yes.
I mean, she at least had some marijuana in her body at the time that she died.
Yes.
Now, in this case, you learn that Kay, once she got into that party, she was told to leave by Courtney Perez.
Earlier in the evening, yes. When she got to the door of the party the first time with Chris Colin, they were turned around.
But once she finally snuck into that party, Courtney Perez saw her and told her to leave.
I don't know if she snuck in or not, but I just know that she was there.
Well, she got in somehow.
Yeah.
And Courtney Perez didn't let her in at the front door.
Well, I don't know if Courtney was there. I don't know who let her in. All I know is that she was there. She could have easily just walked on from the sidewalk. So.
But you would agree with me that when Courtney Perez saw her, he told her to leave when he saw her after she gained access to that backyard of the home.
Yes, he did.
But she didn't leave, did she? He saw her again in the front yard.
Yes,
Again, he told her to leave,
yes,
but she didn't.
correct.
You learned that when Kay was climbing on that lifeguard chair, people told her to get down.
Perez did, yes.
But she didn't climb down, did she, officer?
No, she did not. She did wind up on the ground though.
She had a blood alcohol content of 0.19 at the time of her death.
Yes,
Some of the effects of alcohol on the body are impaired judgment,
yes,
can make us take risks that we usually wouldn't take,
sure,
can impair our motor skills,
yes,
and it can even make us expose ourselves to danger.
sure,
That's why drinking responsibly is key.
yes.
Thank you, no further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
Good luck. What? Alcohol's terrible. It was a good cross.
Officer Bell. Officer Bell, what were you brought on to investigate?
The death of KJ, or the accident of KJ.
Go find Mama.
In these investigations, what is your goal?
To determine the cause of the accident.
So as part of these investigations, is it necessary for you to investigate things that aren't the cause of the accident?
No, if I gather from my investigation that certain things or people's interviews have no relevance to the actual accident in front of me, then there's no need for me to follow up that lead.
And Officer Bell, can you tell us what the cause of Kay Denton's death was?
Trauma to the head and brain. Or
Does the autopsy report list anything about drinking as a cause of the death?
drinking as a cause of death.
No, the cause of death. Does that say anything about drinking?
No,
What about smoking?
no,
Now, opposing counsel talked to you about some of the things that can happen when somebody's drinking, impaired judgment, motor skills. Are those things typically visible in someone with a 0.19 blood alcohol content level?
yes,
Which those things have been visible to Andrew Dornberg and Courtney Perez that night?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
No further questions.
Anything else for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
All right, witness may step down. Does the plaintiff have any other witnesses it wishes to call?
No, Your Honor, but at this time may I approach and retrieve the exhibits published to the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, we would ask to confirm what exhibits have been entered. We have 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, and 12.
That's what I have.
We would also move at this time for a judgment as a matter of law.
They need to rest their case first. Does
Your
plaintiff
Honor.
rest?
I also have that exhibits 3 and 11 have been entered. That's
3 and 11. All right. We're good on the list of exhibits? So basically everything?
Yes, Your Honor,
All right.
at this time the plaintiff rests.
Or before the plaintiff rests, can I now move these to the clerk's desk?
Yes, go ahead. Plaintiff rests. Do we have any motions from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense moves for a judgment as a matter of law. Today, the plaintiff alleged that this fraternity knowingly allowed Kay Denning into their home while knowing she was under the age of 21, or while knowing she was intoxicated, or that some member of this fraternity told her to dive off that chair. At this point in the trial, after the plaintiff has presented all their evidence, they've presented insufficient evidence to create any genuine issue of fact as to whether this fraternity, in fact, breached their duty to Ms. Denning. We heard no evidence that any member of this fraternity knew she was under the drinking age, knew that she was intoxicated on that night, and we heard no evidence that any member of this fraternity told her to go anywhere near that chair. At this point, they failed to create an issue of a a genuine issue of material fact, and therefore judgment as a matter of law is proper.
What about that?
Your Honor, one point specifically we'd like to address is that we did not have to allege that she was allowed into the home. We simply had to establish that Kay Denning was at that party, and we have done so. Additionally, our burden today is to prove that the defendants are negligent, and we only have to do that in view of this motion being viewed in the light most favorable to the non-moving party. We have established, we have laid enough foundation for our jury to determine that the defendants did have a duty to Kay Denning, that they did breach it, and that breach was the cause of the accident, and that is all we had to do today, and we believe we have done so.
Okay, I will deny that motion this time. Let's take 5 minutes tops.